the book is page 12, which is my myeloma story. And so that's what we're going to be sharing this afternoon, is my myeloma story, but it has been printed in this particular brochure. And these are free to your support group. On because you're going to be taking that home to get home. Sources of information related to myeloma and related to the story. The evaluation form on that is for my presentation today. We look at those very closely and work to improve everything that we do when we go out and speak. So at the end of my time with you folks, if you would fill that out, I'd appreciate it very much, and it will help me be better in 2 weeks when I do the presentation in Mesa, Arizona. So welcome. I have to step away long enough to get my clicker. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for everybody that supports us. And I do have to acknowledge that I am supported today by the Sanofi Genzyme U.S. Corporation, and thank them for the support and the opportunity that they give me to come out and talk with you folks. I wanted to read a thing to start with. Number one, I don't thank my caregiver enough. She's the most important person that's been with me on my journey. I thank her publicly in the settings like this every time I speak, but I don't thank her at home enough, and I realize that. And I try to really be appreciative, because without her on my back, pushing me, and on my back with a hand on the back, helping me along the way, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I publicly, everybody thank your caregiver. And at this meeting last year, on this Friday, I was speaking in a small room, and my phone started buzzing, and I looked down, and it was my son calling me from Cincinnati. I went out after the presentation, and I called back, and his girlfriend said, "Look, we're engaged." And my son said, "And we're getting married tomorrow afternoon in Cincinnati." So I ran off, and I was not able to be here the whole weekend with you folks last year, and I apologize for that. We did have a very small family wedding in her parents' home that following day, less than 24 hours after we got the phone call. It was important because her father, who was a HEMOC oncologist and had retired, had been diagnosed with raging lymphoma 6 months before that time frame. And we were all rushing to ensure that the wedding took place before he passed on. One of his thoughts as he left his family was related to patience. He always was thinking of patience. Acceptance is not a sign of weakness, but an act of courage to continue the fight and find hope in our future. And I read that frequently because I know I have myeloma. I've accepted it. I know what the challenges are. I'm learning about the treatments. I'm learning about where it can go. And that's what gives me the strength to move forward every day and put the hope in the future. And I hope the time that I spend with you puts a little bit of hope in your future. It's kind of one of those iffy things. I don't want people to raise their hand and say, "I've got myeloma." But there are groups of people here that have myeloma. There are caregivers, and there are friends from outside. And that's who we're here to talk with today. cell transplants. Anybody that is living back that has not had a transplant, but she knows what it is. So most of us have transplant knowledge or transplant experience. An autologous stem cell transplant is one where the cells are collected, identification, and returned. The allogeneic is one where the cells come from another patient. So there are two basic types of transplant. A nice picture. There are currently 95,000 of us living with myeloma in the United States. That's a phenomenal number of people. We're one of the very, very smallest blood cancers there is, but there's a bunch of us out there. The current numbers are that about 30,000 cases will be identified each year. When I was diagnosed 10 years ago, that number was approximately 20,000 cases identified each year. It's becoming more common. We don't know why, but that's one of the reasons that we really have to help patients that have it, help them move forward into their futures. One of the things that I did first, one of the first things you should know is that I was going to have a transplant and that I was going to be undergoing chemo is our students at the dental school. I'm a retired dental educator. I spent 25 years in dental education. I love every day of my job, so much that I go back one day a week when I'm in Kansas City. But our students had an organization called Students Take Action, and every year they would have a haircut auction where they would get faculty members and take bids on cutting the faculty members' hair or their classmates' hair. The money always went to the Children's Hospital, which was next door to us, to send children's patients and their caregivers to cancer camp each summer. I decided right off the bat, if I'm going to have my hair come off, I'm going to do it to help somebody else. So over the course of my treatment time while I was still employed, I did 3 haircut auctions and I raised $28,000 to send kids to cancer camp. Again, turning that lemonade stuff, those lemons into lemonade. Looking at how we can help people throughout this journey that we're on together. You folks know about the Paper Parade Project. It seems to me that there's some friends of the Paper Parade Project. I was diagnosed in October of 2007. By Christmas time, my youngest daughter, who was in college at that point in time, folded me 1,000 paper parades. And I can remember going up to her bedroom Christmas Eve when we were ready to serve dinner, knocking on the door and saying, "It's dinner time, you've got to come down." And she's yelling at me, "You can't come in, you can't come in." And about 15 minutes later, she came down and at the dinner table presented me with 1,000 paper parades. Beyond my wife being my finest support person as a caregiver, my family has been totally incredible. And I'll show you some of the things that we've done together throughout this process. Multiple myeloma, you know the definition, a cancer of the blood that develops in the bone marrow, principally affects the plasma cells, and have an effect on the bone, the blood, and the kidney also. I like this picture that shows the inside of the bone. I can remember my mother used to love to eat bone marrow. She'd have a slice of ham and there'd be a little bit of marrow in the bone, and that was her favorite part of the meal. Now that I have myeloma, I just cringe. There is no way that you can get me to eat bone marrow. It's not good for you. Particularly my bone marrow is not good. Would be passing. That was one of her favorites. Myeloma cells are malignant plasma cells in the bone marrow. They produce a high level of M protein in the blood and the urine, which is called the M spike. The traditional CRAB symptoms have been up there's those feisty myeloma cells. I'm unique in that I was diagnosed in October of 2007, and I was a dental educator at that point. When I had my first bone marrow biopsy, I asked the pathologist to send slides to the oral pathologist at the dental school so that I could go down and look at my own slides and see what was happening. I went into my office one day, and here's a box of slides on my desk, kind of looking at them, and I called him up and I said, there's a box of slides up here that really need to come to your office. And he said, no, I put them from my office to your office because they are your slides. And he had already reviewed them. He asked me if I wanted to know what he found out. So of course I trotted down to his office, and he talked to me about how he had gone through the box of slides, looked at the cells that were on it, identified that he felt that this was a myeloma patient, and then he looked at the box to see who it belonged to and found out it was me. And that's the way he normally did his diagnosis. He would look at the evidence and then go back to reading it to the patient. I had never heard of myeloma. I went to my textbook, which was already 30 years old. There was about this much space about multiple myeloma. Like everybody else, I went to the internet, and there was over 1 million hits on the internet. So I knew I was a multiple myeloma patient before my oncologist called me. The oncologist called within a couple of days and said, I need to have you make an appointment at the office and come and see us soon. And I said, I know what you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me I have multiple myeloma. And I related to him the story as to how I had found out. We had that meeting with the oncologist, the first appointment with the oncologist, and it was a 3-hour meeting. That was pretty phenomenal. So over our head with what was going on, so over our head with treatment options, so over our head with medication options, that we really came out of it not knowing what was happening. But I spent time with the physical therapist, with the nurse practitioner, with the pharmacist, with the physician. Everybody on that team met with us that very first day. Reality set in when we went into the pharmacy to get my first round of Dex. Well, I can't talk with medications. To get my first round of 2 medications, and the pharmacist said, your bill will be $7,000 today. And I'm going, the numbers are falling into place, and I said, I'm still working full time. Can I do $7,000 a month? But I will say that my support through the university, through the insurance plan, and through the work opportunities that I maintained at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Dentistry were and remain to today phenomenal. My out-of-pocket expenses have been very, very minimal. My support from the dean and other faculty members when I was working was phenomenal. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. But then I asked my wife, and she will tell you straight out, this was the worst month of her life. Because I said, it's late October, all of our kids who live all over the world are going to be home for Thanksgiving, and I want to sit everybody down at the table at the same time and tell them what's going on. I don't want to send an email out to a daughter in Germany and a son who is overseas and tell them what's happening. I want everybody at the table at the same time. And she will walk right up to you today and say that was the worst month of her life because I put that expectation on her. It also turned out to be the most wonderful Thanksgiving we ever had as a family. Once we had that talk the night before Thanksgiving and people found out what was up, as I said, my family has been behind me 100% every day since that diagnosis. And that's really the most important group that you have to support you. Okay, we talked about my diagnosis. the things that doctors do when they get ready to diagnose any of us is look at the aggression of the myeloma. I heard some people talk yesterday, and the lady who was the primary presenter at this particular meeting was the caregiver. She says this disease should be called our loma, because as a caregiver, she was as involved with her husband as he was going through treatment. So I kind of like that. I'm beginning to figure out how I can use that as I move forward. The doctor has to look at overall health, the current symptoms, previous treatment. Current symptoms for me, I was referred to the oncologist because I was having alternating kidney infections and pneumonia. And my internist would treat one of those infections. Every time he said there's something else going on, and every time he said myeloma was one of the things that he thought it was. He was thinking about it early. You ask about the M spike, the protein in the urine. I can remember him very distinctly saying, "John, you have an elevated protein in your urine." And I said, "Yeah, you're right. I had a protein shake for breakfast this morning." And he would say, "You are not quite listening to what I'm saying, or you're not understanding what I'm saying." And I didn't understand it until I got the diagnosis in my head. It was just going over my head. It wasn't sinking in. Previous treatment, that's what I was having as I moved into the process. Cell transplant, as we mentioned earlier, it's cells from the patient themselves. So within our speakers group and within the scope of this particular get-together, we do talk about autologous transplant and not the allogeneic. In the process of getting ready to collect my cells, I mentioned that I went on a consolidation phase from December through February of 2008. And then in February of 2008, they collected my cells. And they used a medication that helped mobilize those cells. And I like to think about it, it stimulates your body to make more cells, but in my mind it also makes them slick so that they jump out of the bone marrow into the bloodstream so that they can be collected easily. I was able to collect enough cells for 2 transplants in 2 days. Some people can do it in a day. Some people it takes a little bit longer. But it took me two rounds of collection. In my previous life, I had donated platelets to a friend who had leukemia. And so every other week I was donating platelets. I thought this is going to be a breeze. I'm going to go in and I'm going to collect my own stem cells. That first day was brutal to me because I was really not prepared for 5 hours on the machine. I went in with the thought I'm going to be there an hour and a half and I'm going to get it done. That was one of the days that I remember as being brutal. The second day seemed to go fine, and we waited for a few weeks before they did the stem cell transplant. Here we are, rescuing those cells, collecting them, and always where your lucky cells. I don't have them on today, but I wear them out publicly quite a bit. They really help. As I said, it took them 2 days to collect these stem cells. My lead-up medications, the chemo for the transplant. I did both of my transplants as an inpatient. I was not an outpatient. That was the philosophy of my treatment center at the time I was treated. My first round of chemo was on St. Patrick's Day in March of 2008. My wife went home, photoshopped the chemo bag green, and we sent it out to all our friends. John's celebrating St. Patrick's Day with green chemo, and he's having a big time, and everything's wonderful. And that's the way it was. The second round was the following day, day of rest to let that chemo do its job and get out of my system, and then it was time to get the cells back. Again, a unique circumstance that I created for myself. At our facility at that point in time, the stem cells were stored in large plastic syringes, about that big around and about 9 inches long. And when they brought the syringe in, I said to the nurse, I would like to give myself the cells back. So what are you talking about? We give cells to the patient. And I said, I would really like, everything in my life seems to be so out of control at this point in time. I would like to spend the next 2 or 3 hours controlling my future by giving the stem cells back. She said, I'll have to ask the doctor. They asked the doctor, and he said, certainly he can do that. I know my smart aleck attitude. I probably said to her, I'm a dentist. I've given more shots than you did. And I know how to do it. Luckily, I was able to do that. To me, it was a very important step in ensuring my future, ensuring the direction that I was going to go. And they also let me do that the second time. So it's a very important step for me. The recovery part, engraftment, is when those cells start growing in your bone. When those new cells start developing and replacing the cells in your bloodstream, replacing the cells in your bone marrow. For me, that occurred on about day 10. I had some fairly miserable days, about day 6, 7, and 8. Some friends came to visit me. very strong remission. The only word I heard was remission. And I thought I'm set to go on forever and ever. And I was. I was on medication-supported remission at that point in time for 4.5 years. I was out there smelling the roses. I was doing the daisies. My wife and I travel a lot. We were traveling internationally. All after having the transplant in March, we went to Japan with our sister city group and visited Japan for 3 weeks. Traveling has not slowed down at all. I was in Peru for 3 weeks, the last half of February, last half of January, first half of March. Calendar, January, February. Last half of January, first half of February this year. We've been to Africa. We travel a lot. It doesn't slow you down. It slows you down. It doesn't bring an end to us. In Peru, I only did about half the hikes, but I made it all the way through Machu Picchu until the last step. I didn't lift my left foot high enough. There were 10 people behind me, instantly helping me get back up. I was not hurt. I made it through Machu Picchu. I mentioned that my family was the most supportive group of people in my life, and they still remain that way. In the spring and summer of 2012, my numbers started coming back up. The doctor suggested that we do a second stem cell transplant at that point in time. That's when I took advantage of that opportunity that we all should take advantage of. Get second opinions. I respect my doctors. I love my doctors. I saw my doctors at a BMT meeting in Orlando last weekend. I have a very good interaction with them because I talk to them about once a month. They see me coming down the street and they turn and go the other way because they know I talk to them. My doctors are incredible. And at that point in time, I was up. Should I do the second transplant now? Or should I wait 6 months, a year, to the time that the myeloma was really strong again? I talked to Ken Anderson, I talked to Brian Dury, I talked to Art Richards, and everyone said, do the second transplant while your body's the strongest it's been in a long time. Put me on a different medication, and that different medication brought me into complete remission within a month. Again, why am I doing this transplant at this point in time? But the doctors conferred that was the time to do it. So I did my second transplant in October of 2012. I had made plans, I had talked to my deans, I had talked to the university, that I was going to retire on September 30th of 2012. That was the day after my 70th birthday. Perfect time to retire. Here comes this transplant. As I said earlier, my university and my dean and my faculty were 100% supportive of me, and the dean extended my contract until the end of the year so that I could do the transplant under the university insurance and with the university's support. So I just delayed retirement a couple months, had the second transplant, and came back out of it in stronger remission than after the first one. And I've been on medication-supported remission through July of this year. And then those sneaky numbers started sneaking back up a little bit. And beginning in December of this last year, I am now on a 3 medication cocktail, and I'm doing well. The numbers are going back down. An advantage that we got in Kansas City within the last year is we now have a myeloma specialist. We didn't have one before. I think he's going to be dynamite with our population. He's come to our support group. I've had 2 appointments with him. He relates very well to patients. He got my story before I got there, so he knew who was coming. And I really think highly of him with just 2 appointments. So it's been a true advantage to our community to have a myeloma specialist. If you have a myeloma specialist at your treatment center, yay for you. They're very, very important people. If you don't, my personal opinion is reach out and get that consultation with those people because they deal with myeloma every day. And it's their loma too. You know, it belongs to them. If they relate to patients, it's their loma as well as mine. So this picture at the time of my getting ready for my 2nd transplant, another daughter of ours sent out an email blast to over 300 people, and over 300 people sent me caring hands. She had sent out a pattern of a hand and sent out paper and suggested that they write me a message and send it back to her. I didn't know what was going on. Once again, we were in Colorado, and our kids who are adult kids and then our grandkids, they kind of said, come on, come on, come on. And the kids snuck off and went down to another cabin. And I didn't know what was going on. And I came back, they came back with 300 caring hands. It totally put me on the floor. One of the most incredible things that's ever happened. But as I say, it's that family and friends that give us our hope for the future. Oh, it works. This is my haircut after my first transplant, my Halloween hair. It's my favorite wig. I love it. I wear it every chance I get. I wish I had that hair every day. But that was what I looked like at the transplant time and then with my favorite hair. Those of you that I've spoken to personally, since we've been together today, we've all talked about learning and education. The most important thing we can do for ourselves as a patient is learn. The most important thing a caregiver can do is learn. That's what gives you the hope. That's what gives you the knowledge. That's what gives you the drive to move forward. You know, always take a list of questions to your doctor. Don't hesitate to ask those questions. Take somebody with you to listen. The best listener that went to the doctor with my wife and I before the first transplant was that daughter that was in college. She was a science major, and she understood some of the terms better than my wife did. She's a science major, so she thinks more like I think, because I was a science major, science-directed person. And she had a little bit of distance, a little bit of emotional distance that let her listen better than we were listening. So if you have an extra person, be sure and take them. A lot of doctors will let you record their conversations with you. Be sure and take notes and formulate those questions before you go back to see them again. Utilize all available resources. Don't go on the internet and just Google myeloma. There's so many good resources, and we're providing you with some of the resources that we like on that paper that I gave you today. Have an evaluation for a transplant. Newly diagnosed patients, you may not qualify for a transplant, but find out about it. Make sure that it's an option for your future, or make sure that it could be an option for you. General questions that people ask. When can I return to work? I returned to work. I started going back to work after the first transplant at about 30 days. My wife would drive me to the school, and I'd be there a couple of hours. I was lucky my office was isolated. It was not in the clinic. I put a sign on my front door that said, virtual hugs and kisses are great, but I can't touch you. And all of my friends would come by each day and just stand and wave and say hi. So I started back to work about 30 days, a couple hours each day, getting a little bit longer each week. I'd set a personal goal for myself after that first transplant to be at a meeting in Washington, D.C. on day 60. I was on the board of directors for the American Dental Education Association, and I was going to be at that meeting. The nurses told me, "You're not going to that meeting." I asked one of the doctors, he said, "It's okay. We don't suggest it, but it's okay." I made it to Washington, D.C. for that meeting on day 60. That was my personal goal in the recovery stage, to get myself back going again and out there functioning as normally as I could. Certainly, I wore a mask on the plane. I did all of the precautions that I could, and I was great. You folks have had myeloma, you know these symptoms. You'll also have them following transplant. Mouth sores, as a dentist, one of the tricks, and I know that everybody knows this at this point in time, chewing ice when you're doing the chemo sometimes help eliminate those mouth sores. There's a lot of things going on the internet right now about an ice cap that ladies are using for chemo for their breast cancer treatments that are helping them maintain their hair in the process. So it's that cooling. It keeps those blood vessels from expanding and making things worse. There's not a cure for myeloma at this point in time. Stem cell transplant doesn't cure us. Occasionally, it does, but generally it doesn't. It extends the time that we're around to fight this disease. It extends the time that we're out here dealing with life in a normal way. And it extends that time. It keeps you going. And now we are so fortunate. The new medications that have come along are really prolonging the amount of time that myeloma patients have. I spoke to a gentleman earlier this morning who is 5 years ahead of me in the process. So he's at 15 years at this point in time. And I'm going, man, you're my hero. You know, I want to be you. I want to keep it going at least that long. I'm a woodworker. I have a book over here somewhere. If any of you folks want to look at it, in a previous life, I actually carved 26 full-size carousel animals, and I have a 10-animal carousel that I've built. And that's kind of fun. A previous life, it was prior myeloma. I will tell you the last time the carousel was set up was the spring of 2007, right before I was diagnosed in the fall of 2007. It was set up for our daughter's wedding reception. She was married in the spring in Germany, and they were in Kansas City later that year, and we set it up in the yard for her wedding reception. The next time it's going to be set up is this summer. That young couple who did the home wedding in Cincinnati last year are having a big wedding in Cincinnati in June. And when they come to Kansas City in the fall, the carousel will be back up, and that's the first time it's been back up in 10 years. But it's kind of fun to see. This picture, when I retired, I said I'm going to learn something new every year of my life. I've been a woodworker my entire life. My dad was a shop teacher and a high school principal and assistant superintendent of schools. My grandfather was a contractor. So I've been around woodworking all my life. In the summer of 2013, after I retired in 2012, I took a month-long hand tool furniture building workshop in Greenwich, New York, at the Maplewood School for the Common Craft. Came home with a rocking chair, a toolbox, and a coffee table. Those were 10-hour days standing on my feet. I can tell you, it was tough, but it was so rewarding. The skills that I learned, the opportunities that I had to move forward. This picture in the summer of 2015, my son, the guy who lives in New York City, who's getting married in a couple months, and I went to the Wooden Boat School in Brookline, Maine and we built a wooden kayak. It's a beautiful, beautiful boat. Truly beautiful boat. You build it in a week and then you take it home and it has 10 coats of marine varnish on the inside and outside. It's lined with fiberglass. It's outlined with fiberglass. And I sent a text message to Fatima, who's back there texting right now, saying, I'm going through Boston with a kayak on the top of my car, and you live in Boston, so wave at me on the freeway. And she sent it back, I'm in the suburbs and I'll wave anyway. So my son and I built a wooden kayak that's a truly beautiful boat. I mentioned that he lives in New York City. So the first stop, the first day that the kayak was on the road on its way back to Kansas City was in Times Square to take a photograph of the boat on top of the car. I carve wooden masks. I take part in a Fastnet festival in Kornwestheim, Germany each year. That's where our daughter lives and our grandkids live. Fastnet is the German form of Mardi Gras. And I've been able to become friends with a Fastnet club and walk in their parade each year for the last 3 years. And this is a mask I carved and a friend of mine made the costume to kind of make an Uncle Sam guy for the Fastnet parade. This last summer in 2016, the daughter who did the fancy hands, the carrying hands for me, and I went back to the Wooden Boat School in Brookline, Maine, and built a fishing dory. It's not the boat, folks. It's that week that you can spend with a child, an adult child, doing something together. The experience is the meaning. The experience is the important part. Again, same street corner in New York with the second boat on the top of the car. Thanks
John,
to the
can you move
IMF,
over a little bit, please? Yeah.
Thanks to the IMF, I have the opportunity to help coordinate the support group in Kansas City. Thanks to Sanofi Genzyme, I have the opportunity to go out and speak to support groups all over the country. In the last 3 years, I know I've done over 20 support groups. It's a true, true gift to me to be able to come out and talk to people like you. I gain more energy coming out of your eyes right now watching me than I can ever put out. I thank you for that opportunity. I've had the opportunity in Missouri to testify for oral parity medications law. I've met with my U.S. representative in Washington, D.C. to help talk about oral parity laws. I've been active in the Myeloma Awareness Month in March, gaining city proclamations in our area. And I was in the room when Governor Nixon in Missouri signed the oral parity law into effect. I was sitting in the front row, and I got to put my hand up and say, from all myeloma patients and all cancer patients, thank you for creating this support for us. It's truly been a wonderful trip. I had the opportunity when ICER brought forward their concerns about the cost of myeloma medications last summer to go to the ICER meeting and to testify on behalf of patients. And I've done a couple of TV videos for an organization called Patients Rising, talking about the importance of a patient and a doctor making the treatment decisions, not an insurance company. My buddy Scott. Scott Hamilton has a wonderful, wonderful fundraiser each fall to raise money for his Hamilton Cares Foundation, which supports research, supports patients, supports doctors, supports nurses. You guys had a table there this last year. I went by and talked to your ladies. Scott has a program called the Fourth Angel Mentor Program. Scott came out of his initial treatments feeling that he had one angel a doctor, one angel a family, one angel a nurse, but what was missing was that interaction with the patient. And through Scott's Fourth Angel program, I phone mentor patients across the country. Through the IMF, I phone mentor patients across the country. And my wife and I have become patrons of that particular event. And Scott now comes up to me and says, "You're myeloma man." He doesn't know my name, but he knows I'm myeloma man. It's a true honor to be able to interact with him. And we all wish him well as he goes through further treatment at this point in time. Machu Picchu, right before I slipped. Tom Brokaw, one of the poster children, adults for myeloma. In September of 2014, I was at a meeting in New York. I said to my son, I heard on the TV that Tom Brokaw is going to be back on the Today Show this morning, in the following morning, and we're going to go talk to him. My son made that nice sign that said, "Hi, Mr. Brokaw, I'm a 7-year survivor. I wish you the best on your journey." He came over, we talked 90 seconds maybe. He went back in the studio and they were talking to him about his journey. And he said, "I just met a patient who's a 7-year survivor out on the plaza." He wrote a book. On page 25, it says, "I met a patient on the Today Show Plaza who's a survivor of multiple myeloma." My son and his girlfriend got me an autographed copy from Tom Brokaw to his friend on the Today Show Plaza. One of the treasures of my life. Again, this journey has brought me so many positive opportunities that I gain strength every time I go out and talk. The copy of those resources that we gave you is open to additional additions in the process. I see one brewing back over here at this table to be added. And I thank you very, very much. It's been my pleasure to spend this time with you. I wish every one of you happiness and success on your myeloma journey. Questions, answers? Yes, ma'am.
What is NCCN guidelines? What's that stand for?
National Cancer. It was back a ways, and it's National Cancer Institute, but that's not quite right. Scott, do you know?
NCCN.
NCCN guidelines.
Okay, thank you. And how long did you take to decide whether they have a transplant or not?
Instantaneous.
Instantaneous?
That first appointment, the doctor told me you are heading toward a transplant in February. That was October. So I went into it with the state of mind that that's what my doctor is recommending. That's what I'm going to do.
And that was a transplant doctor.
That was the hemo doctor.
Oh, okay.
That was before we got to the transplant. At that appointment, he said you are going to be referred to the transplant doctors in January or February. So I didn't even go home and, I went home and tried to find out what a transplant was. Not to go home and say I don't want to do it.
What was your worst side effect during the 100-day recovery?
The worst side effect in the hospital was uncontrollable diarrhea.
Was it C. diff or because of the chemo?
Because of the medications.
Okay.
It was a side effect of the medications. I didn't develop C. diff.
Some kind of bacteria in the gut.
Yeah. And I don't have any bone lesions. My worst long-term side effect is neuropathy in my legs and the tips of my fingers. And I got off the airplane yesterday afternoon and was walking through the airport and I said, I have no neuropathy in my legs or feet right now. I don't know what I did on the airplane, but the entire time I was walking through the airport last night, I had no neuropathy. I have less today than I had three or 4 days ago. For me, it comes and goes in the cycle, but it's generally there. So that's my long-term side effect. Yes.
They have they have discovered that medical marijuana treats the neuropathy very well. In Massachusetts, we have, and I can testify that it does work.
I have children that live in Colorado. So
I think so too.
again, I thank you very, very much for sharing this time. And if you'll fill out those evaluation forms and just hand them in at the table out in the front, that would be very helpful to me.
You have to try and think, John, it's important when you stand behind the podium because the microphones, it wasn't picking you up. So we were going out live and I couldn't get the sound clear. So it's really important.
So I think we got a break time.
That'll open the bar room.
Hi, everybody. That was John, and we're having a break now, and we'll be back shortly, but I'll send a link out for the next speaker.